Come on in right in, everybody. We got just a few more minutes before we'll kick off. Welcome. Thank you very much for everybody for coming today. This is not Psychology 101. This is on air to online, a digital checklist to accelerate your digital growth. So before we get into it, what are the common traits of organizations that really drive successful digital results? We like to believe at SoCast that they really have built a strong foundation around the 4 Ps. That's people. Do you have the expertise and resources to drive digital success? The process. Is digital top of mind and part of the station's daily workflow? Policy. Is it codified within your strategies and within your procedures? That's digital I'm speaking about. And the platform. Does your team have the tools they need to deliver it? So let's get into it today. I brought on 3 amazing panelists who have succeeded in digital and bring a great deal of practical experience on how to succeed in digital. They come from markets of all different sizes, from small to large, from very small to actually very large. They have great practical examples, and they cover actually a good range of different roles within the radio station. The first person I want to introduce is Amy Stroud, sitting in the center, and she's the Senior VP at Fork Broadcasting and the host of Mid-Mornings with Amy on Somerset 106.1 WYKY in Somerset, Kentucky. She attended the University of Cumberland and completed a fellowship with the University of Kentucky, and she interned at the NBC News of London office. After a brief foray into political and nonprofit sectors, Amy's very happy to be back in the broadcasting, working in a small market radio group, and has been with Fork Broadcasting for the last 5 years. Amy was named one of Radio Inc.'s magazine's Rising Stars in 2013, and we're very pleased to have her on our panel today. Give her a round of applause. Thank you. Todd Stapleton, despite his picture, where he looks very small, is quite a large man and has been working with Bud Walters and the Cromwell Radio Group, specifically in Vandalia, Illinois, for 17 years, and the past 9 as general manager. In addition to running 2 radio stations, Todd is the news and sports director and handles all of the high school sports broadcast on the station for the Vandalia Vandals. Todd also takes the community service aspect of his position very seriously. He is the president of the Vandalia Chamber of Commerce, chairman of the Economic Development Commission, chairman of the Fayette County CEO, and also serves on the Vandalia High School Hall of Fame Committee and on the City of Vandalia's Bicentennial Committee. Todd's co-workers joke that he accomplishes all of this and still manages to work half days from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Vince Benedetto. Right here, round of applause for Todd, can't forget him. Vince Benedetto is the founder and president and CEO of Bold Gold Media, which owns and operates 12 radio stations in Pennsylvania and New York State. He's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, a former Air Force captain, an Air Force OSI special agent, where he worked on counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and felony-level investigative efforts for the Department of Defense, so don't lie to him. When Vince separated from the Air Force in his late 20s, he formed Bold Gold, where his growing portfolio of radio stations has become leaders in social and digital media engagement. He has been recognized as a top young entrepreneur by numerous organizations and serves on a number of boards, including the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters and on RAB Sales Advisory Committee. So welcome, Vince. Thank you very much. So I want to start off with talking to you guys a little bit about some of the strategies around the people within your organization. And I think I'll start with Vince and ask Vince, what are some of the strategies you've used to rally your team around digital and to make sure that they're embracing and adopting digital throughout?
Well, one of the things that we've been working on, and it's an ongoing process, is the leadership and the management at the company have to be passionate and engaged in the digital side of things. I think too often in media companies, and not just radio, digital's kind of thought of as an additive thing or something we have to do. because the times are changing and we have to keep up. And so oftentimes it's delegated or relegated to a digital person or a marketing person or a promotions person to kind of roll out these platforms. And it's not necessarily embraced culturally or philosophically at the owner or management level. So I think, from my standpoint, probably one of the most important things I've done is build a leadership team that is engaged with it at their level. And in fact, a couple years before we got heavily involved in some of our social and digital efforts, I spent a lot of time personally doing due diligence on it and wanted to become as much of an expert on it as I could, so that I could speak from a position of knowledge, not just authority, but an actual position of knowledge on it, and so that I could lead by example with that. And so it's intrinsic in the culture at this point.
That's great. Amy, how have you gone about making sure it's intrinsic in your culture as well?
Well, I completely agree. If you own a station or manage a station, your digital growth has to be important to you. Even though you may not be the one doing it every day, you have to show your support for those that are doing it. And you have to be willing to invest in finding someone to lead the efforts or a group of team to lead those efforts. I work in small market radio, so sometimes we don't have the luxury of expanding our digital department to be more than myself sometimes. But you as station leadership have to realize that digital and your online is a part of what radio is now. So we have to do it, but it doesn't have to be something that we dread doing. It's something that's of benefit to our listeners and to our clients. And as Eric said earlier, you want to be where your listeners are. And you want to engage with your listeners how they are engaging with you. So if you can show your staff, if you can show your team, this is important. This is how people are coming to us now. This is how we can come to people and how we can help our clients. And so when they can see some value in it, then they're more apt to get on board with realizing this is what we need to do. And then together you can come up with the best strategies on how to do it.
Thank you. And Todd, with you, do you have any tricks that you've used to nurture your internal digital champions and make sure that they're rewarded and recognized for it to help promote the type of culture Vince and Amy have mentioned?
Yeah, we do. I mean, that's we make it a priority, certainly, and have for several years, because just like you mentioned, you want to be where your listeners are, where your community is. And that's been one of the biggest driving forces for us, is you want to be where your community is, and you want to reach, I think you reach new people. You have the folks that are listeners to your stations, but I think you're reaching new people when you're online. And I think in some instances you're introducing them to your stations that maybe they didn't know about before, and especially if they're younger or they've been out of touch. So I think you reach new people the deeper you're able to get into being online.
Great. Vince, with you, when you're bringing new people into the organization, what do you look for in a new hire today versus what you may have looked for, years back?
Yeah, I look for attitude. Our industry is not so complicated that you can't learn the things that you need to know if you have the right attitude. We live in an environment and a world, and certainly we work within an industry that you can't centralize it. You can try, and a lot of people have, and it doesn't work. And certainly digital does not work that way. So you have to have people that are self-motivated. You have to have people that, when they see an opportunity, know how to go take advantage of it. And that's all attitude. If you have to tell somebody, and one of the things important to me at the ownership level is I don't want to have to tell everybody what they need to be doing all the time. I like to outline the philosophy, set the goal and objective, and then empower them to reach it. But in order for that to work, you have to have the right people. So, and part of it is sometimes organizations do have the right people, but on the leadership side, they're not empowering them to do the right things. One of the things, one of the areas in Bold Gold Media Group that we've excelled at is on the social media side. I've spoken a lot at this conference actually about one of our Facebook pages for our station 105 The River in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's one of the most followed radio stations in the country on Facebook. And it's coming up on about 900,000 likes and over 800,000 followers. And one of the things we did early on that, almost 8 or 9 years ago, is we very decentralized our social media effort. We allowed the DJs to be engaged on the station, time the actual posts with the on-air talk, and encourage them to do that and kind of experiment with that. At a time that you might remember, and some of you may still be dealing with this, a lot of broadcast companies wanted to kind of centralize that role, have a social media expert that would post or proof or do everything. And I think the fear was that, on-air personalities might post things that would get the station in trouble or look bad or weren't appropriate. And I used to make the comment years ago that if you can trust the person to speak into a multi-million-dollar FCC licensed radio station, you should be able to let them post a Facebook post. But a lot of companies were still very apprehensive about that. I think that's getting better, but you have to trust people. You have to outline the boundaries and then let them work to improve themselves, and then acknowledge when they do well and say, do more of that. So,
And the biggest core for us is news coverage, sports, information, and it's got to be instinctual that you're going to do it. And I have myself, and I have one other person that covers news and takes care of that. And it's no different than somebody coming over on a double team in basketball. If you think about it, you're going to be late and you're going to commit a foul. So it's got to be something that you instinctively know to get out there. Just like, I'm a news guy originally. That's my background. And it's got to be the same thing that you've got to put online is you've got to just get to it and get to work on it and get somebody who's passionate about it and is going to get that information out there quickly. And that's what we do. I mean, that's the biggest thing we do every day is get the information out as quick as we can online.
Great, thank you. It was very insightful. Now, you mentioned that you're posting a lot. I know Todd posts a lot. He uses the SoCast platform. Vince does not. But what sort of tools, Vince, do you recommend using to make sure that you can produce the quantity of posts and make it efficient? Is there anything you recommend to the audience on that?
The main thing is technique. Anything that makes it easier or is more efficient, like the SoCast platform, that helps. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that people know what they should be posting. Like, they know what to post. One of the things with radio, I often say if Facebook or social media didn't exist, radio should have invented it. It's the ultimate way to engage listeners, and it works. Of all the mediums out there, it's the most perfect synergy with broadcasting, with broadcast radio. When you think about really what makes local radio, it's really what you're doing in between the music. And that's where social media for you lives too. So it's what you're talking about, the local gossip, local interest, things about the artist you're playing. One of the things to know about, particularly Facebook, if you're using that, and most stations are, timing is everything. If you can get engagement on a post relatively quickly after you post it, it's more likely to come up in other people's news feeds. So the thing you should be doing is making sure that your on-air personalities are actually posting right before or as they're going into their DJ talk. So if they're posting something, for example, on our rock station in Scranton, if we're going to post something about an artist we're playing, let's say it's something about, Sting was coming to a concert venue near us. So if the on-air personality was going to post something about Sting, tying it back into the local, talk because he's coming to the area, if you post something and then the on-air personality goes on and says, I just posted something about Sting, I'll bet you never knew. Go check it out on our Facebook page. I just posted it. Leave a comment, and maybe we'll talk about some of your comments up there, but this will shock you. And then you go into the song. What happens is, since that is a fresh post, the extra on-air engagement that you can drive to that will kind of, in a way, throw some kerosene on the Facebook algorithm. Kind of jumpstart that post a little bit. You just get 5 or 10 more people than otherwise would have seen that post organically because of the DJ talk. You'd be surprised how much that will drive that up in people's news feeds. And that's how you can start to get things to go viral more often, or at least make sure that before the organic reach starts to trail off, that you're getting more distance out of it. And that will dramatically change the reach you get. And you do that consistently, and you get the DJs good at that, both with local content and content related to the format of the station, you'll be surprised how much that will improve your following. And then in our case, in order to grow our digital, to answer more pointedly your question, by becoming real leaders in our marketplace in social, where our sites, our radio station sites, greatly exceeded the following of any of our client sites. How you monetize your success in that social space isn't going out and selling necessarily Facebook ads or your own Facebook reach. It's when your salespeople sit down with a business and you're selling the influence of your station, you don't have to sit there and debate them about it. You know, if their Facebook page for their fan page for their company has 500 likes and your radio station has 40,000 or 400,000, you are a living example of the influence your station has, the interest in your radio station. It matters very little at that point about average quarter-hour share and those things. You have proof in something they all understand. Everybody's on Facebook. If you're successful at it, or you're successful at any of the social media platforms, exponentially more than the clients you're trying to, convince that you are a digital expert, that's going to, more than any of your words, that will show them that you're good at what you do and that your stations matter. And that's how you sell the broadcast and the narrowcast side of things, the on-air and the off-air side of things, and monetize it. And so, the content and the timing of the content. It's not just the content. Just like on air and social, it's the timing of the content and then what you do on air related to it that really makes it the magic work. So.
Great. I think I don't owe anybody a beer now. There was 3 nuggets in there for sure, so don't come grab me after. Yeah, I'll buy you a beer for sure. That's great insight. Amy, with you, you use a digital platform to manage all of your digital. What do you think are some of the more important things to look for in choosing a digital partner, specifically around, helping you manage, looking for a solution to manage your websites, your apps, your social, et cetera? What's critical to you?
Well, again, coming from and working in small market radio, you have to sometimes seek those outside vendors to be able to help give you the platforms to be able to do what you need to do digitally and online. So I'm not sure where everybody is in your radio digital journey. Many of you all may have been doing it and making it profitable and successful for a while. Some may have just started or haven't begun the journey yet. But if you are looking for an outside vendor to help give you platforms, and by platforms I mean when you're building a website, you have to have someone to actually build the site for you. You may know what needs to be on it and what you want to do with it and its functionalities, but you actually need it to be built. So you need to look for people who, first of all, have your best interest at heart, because I feel like if you are a radio company, a radio station, and you're looking for an outside vendor to do something for you, they become a part of your workforce. They become a part of your radio station. So you have to, you have to make sure that they understand your company, they understand your business, and they understand your market and what you are looking for. So just as any good vendor will do, they will have done a little research about you before they call you and talk about what they have to offer. You need to do some research on the vendor. Who have they worked with before? What have they done before? And call people. I called Todd about SoCast to get his input on his use of the platform, because that was important to me to know the actual end user. And that's what it ultimately is about. It needs to be quick and easy and for the end user, the people at your stations who are actually using the platforms. But getting back to digital and social media and how best to do it, you have to know your market. You have to know what social mediums your listeners, potential listeners, people that you want to listen to you are using. So we have 9 markets, and they're all small markets, but they're in different types of markets and cities. And so some stations may have very Twitter-friendly listeners. Other markets, not so much. So we realize we can't do it all. We can't run the gamut of having all social media. So we have to decide, what do we do best? What can we maintain? And what do our listeners use? And how are they engaging with us? And that's what you focus on. If you can do it all and do it all well, that's great. But don't, we say all the time, don't have a social medium if you cannot maintain it. It's a daily endeavor. So But it's very important when you're looking for vendors to help you, I always think of them as they're a part of your team.
You got to be consistent. And I think that's where you're going to is think about in your own personal time, if you've went to a website, they haven't updated, you go back again, they haven't updated. About 3 times, you're done. You're not going to go back. So you've got to be consistent with the updates that you're doing, both social media and your website. I think that's the number one key. When you're working with somebody, it's got to be pretty easy to use, because most of us are old radio guys, and I'm not the most tech savvy guy by any means, and it's got to be pretty simple to use, and it's got to be something that you not only can sit down and be able to get posts on, but when I'm at a football game, I've got to be able to do it mobily. I've got to be able to take care of things like that quickly and easily. And I'd say that's consistency for yourself, and then it's got to be an easy platform for you to use, and got to be able to share it. That's one thing with SoCast is you're able to share with multiple social media pages at one time, and that helps out a lot too, because you can push it all out at one time, and it's out there.
You asked earlier about what you look for when you're hiring people to help you with your digital. Again, I'm not sure where you are in with your digital platforms, but when you're looking for someone to be the director of what you're doing digitally and online, you don't necessarily need to go find someone with a program director's background or someone who is astute at the technical back end of it all. That's great if you can find someone to do that for you, but that's what vendors are there for, to help you with. You need to find someone who's a broadcaster. If you can, find someone who understands your business, who understands radio, and who can help you know what needs to be on your website, because they know radio and because they know your market. Someone who can tell you how to use Facebook, how to use an app. Can't build it for you, but can tell you what it needs to do and what it needs to do for your station. Make an inventory of what you need to do digitally. So if you're looking to hire someone, look for someone who understands the business and who can help take all of these social mediums and online initiatives and make it work for your station.
Great insights, thank you. I'll start with Vince again, because we seem to be having a good flow here. Vince, if you could invest in one technology this year with respect to digital and radio, what would it be and why?
Well, the thing that we're working on now, this is we're getting to the point where we're starting to sell a considerable amount of digital services that are now unrelated to our core broadcast business. I think it's important to understand there's really 2 types of, there's more, but for all practical purposes, there's 2 types of digital services you're probably selling. Some are more incremental revenue in nature, where you're essentially selling something that's additive to your station schedule that you're selling. So maybe that's a spot on the app, maybe that's a spot on the website, something like that. But a lot of you may be starting to sell or have been selling actual digital services beyond that, such as geo-targeting services and things where you may be handling a client now that's spending a lot of money every month and they're not even on the radio. And so, this year was, we spent a handful of years trying to make sure that people believed us as digital experts. And how we did that was we did that, in our case, through social. Like, I think it's the kiss of death to send your salespeople in to a business and sit there and say that they're digital experts. They understand digital, and your social sites at the station have maybe a couple dozen more likes than the business that you're pitching. You can't have that. If they've got 800 likes of their Facebook page and your station has 850, and you're in the room saying you understand this digital space, your credibility is going to be hurt. And I've been in meetings with some of my staff where, the meeting didn't start off so well because maybe the person there was really more interested in digital and started off saying, look, we're meeting with you, but, radio's not maybe in our budget this year. We're really shifting more to Facebook or social media marketing. And we had gotten to the position now that we could say, that's great, we have, the most followed radio station in America on Facebook, or one of them, and we know a lot about Facebook. We've got, almost 900,000 followers, and across the company over 1 million. How many do you have? And they're like, well, we have 3,000. And so now we're able to say, now they're asking us how we did it. And so everybody in the room, the business owner, the buyer, whoever it is now, we've established ourselves as an expert in that space. And it's very easy once you become an expert in something in the digital sphere to translate that credibility to other areas. And so this year we've pivoted and emphasized selling digital services, where we can now go into a business and say, look, that several thousands of dollars you're spending on direct mail, why don't you let us take that budget and we can do geo-targeting or geofencing services for you? And so now we're able to start to sell what I would consider the real area of digital that really represents considerable money. When you look at that ad pie that David Field was talking about, that radio gets its 7 or 8% of the total media spend, and then the other 90+% we've not historically gotten. I try to bring an entrepreneurial spirit to my company and say, look, this is the most exciting time to be in media and to be in radio, because this other 90% now is the playing field for us. We can go all over that area and now start bringing in the tools. The other thing I would advise is you got to bring in one thing at a time, the managers in the room or the owners. One of the problems, I think, and it's tempting, is to try to do a lot of digital stuff all at once, and then everybody after you launch it goes, well, how much money is it making? And you got to build it first. And just like if you launched a brand new station, or you rehabbed an old AM station because you got a nice new FM translator and you put a hot new format on it, it would take months and maybe years before that was a real contributor to the bottom line of the company. And it's no different in digital. You're like starting a new business, and just like anything, it might take 3 to 5 years for that to really, really give you an ROI that's worth it. So just think of it in that context. The great thing is, because broadcast radio is such a good business, it's got one of the best margins of any industry in America. No, we don't talk about that a lot. But, I always say, like the restaurant industry, if you're doing everything right, you've got a 4% margin. If you're doing everything wrong in radio, you probably have a 7% margin. The fact that certain companies are riddled with a lot of debt because of those margins should not detract from the point that the business is still one of the highest margin businesses in America, broadcasting. And so we're in a great position in the radio industry to use that to invest in launching other digital initiatives. And but they're not going to be magical. There's no magic bullet for digital. It's really just taking the time and putting the leadership focus on it, and then defining what success is. And it comes in incremental steps. It really does.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, and I agree with several things you said, but the number one thing is, and I remember going to meetings 7, 8, 10 years ago, and you would hear all this information, and it just kind of swim in your head because there was so much. And so I think that's the first thing, is take one thing at a time, master it as best you can, and then move from there. And, I have no problem with saying we're not ready for X, Y, Z, or whatever it is, because if we're not, then you're just going to fail. You're not going to be able to get it going, and you're going to overwhelm your staff with it too. So I think that's one of the biggest things there, is take one thing at a time, master that one thing, and do it the best you can. And it's a difference in market, and I think that's the biggest thing you've got to know about a market. And listening to you talk, and my market is a lot different, and you've got to know. I'm in a town of 6,500 people. We're in a county of 21,000 people. What our community wants and needs is different than a bigger community. And so know your community, know what they want, and know what they're reaching out for. Because if you're providing them, if we flip-flop spots, it would not work that smoothly. But you've got to know your market and know what your folks are looking for every day too. But I would say that's one of the biggest things. Take one thing, master it, and move from there. Because the minute you start chunking off 9 or 10 things and trying to, it's just like your wife gives you 9 things to work on, and you get scattered all over the house for the weekend. If you're able to sit down and do just 1 or 2 of them, you're going to be able to do a little bit better, I hope. So.
Amy, what will you work with your team on investing on this year?
Well, as you know, we are in the process of website redesign and development, and that's the focus for us for the end of the year, because you have to make sure your radio station websites are strong. If you think about when you're looking for whatever it is you're looking for, you search it online, at least I do, and when you have a website that, like Todd said, that comes up for any entity but radio stations, that hasn't been touched in 2 to 3 weeks, or that has old content on it, or that you don't stream, you can't get to your if you stream, you can't get to that from your website. So for us, that's been priority number one this year, is to make sure that all of our stations have strong websites that are destinations for people, because a lot of what we do on the radio is not tangible. But if you can put something on your website that people can go to and look at video about something that the DJs talked about early that morning, or a video of a tour of a business in town, a store, that is what your websites can do for you. And you want to make them, again, destinations, not just places that people go to and get one thing or register for a contest. They go and they don't come back again until you've got another contest going on. You want to get people to your website, maybe through that online contest, but then you want to have enough there to keep them there for a while and to do more. And if that's the first way that people get to you before they ever find you on Facebook or find you on Instagram or follow you on Twitter as a radio station, you want that website to be strong and have the functionalities that it needs. So for us, that's what we're working on this year.
Todd, we know you do, in a town of 6,500, 7,000 people, you have a ton of success with your website. You generating a massive amount of page views relative to the size of your market. What advice do you have for other small market, almost micro market groups to help them grow digital?
I'd say that, like I said a minute ago, Eric, I'd say know your market and know what they're looking for. If you're in a market like ours, where news information is vital, then that's what you need to give to folks. I think I shared this last year, but two of the biggest stories that we've ever had, and I remember you guys touching with us one day because it was the biggest story, I think, on your platforms. Well, one of them was we have a big Halloween parade every year, and we weren't going to have candy thrown out at the parade. And that was one of our biggest stories at that time. It was shared, it was commented on. People were all over social media and our websites with it. And we have a prison in town, and we had somebody escape. And those are probably two of the bigger stories we've had, was information on both of those. And we did have the controversy over new trash cans for town. That was one too. So new orange trash cans for everybody in town, and it was quite controversial. So I think most people wanted brown. So, but I mean, knowing your market is the number one thing in a small market. And the other thing with small market is you've got to be a little bit of everything to everybody, and you're a servant of the people. And I'm not saying that all markets aren't, but in a small market more than anything, I think we're no different than elected officials in a lot of ways, because we're there to provide for the people of our community and give them information and provide them with emergency information, and we know how important that is throughout the country, but even more so in a small market because we don't have any other way to get that out. We don't have television. We don't have daily newspapers. We don't have a lot of those things. So I look at us as a servant of the people each and every day. I feel like that's our job, and our duty is to provide the folks in our community, in our county, with up-to-date information on whatever it may be.
And just to add to that a little bit, I think, especially in small market radio, your job as a radio station is to keep people safe and informed. And when you're thinking about posts to make, if you're just getting into the digital and social media world, we're music, we're fun, we're radio, we have great promotions, we have great contests. We want to be fun for people, and we are. But when people are scared and when they don't know what's happening with their weather, if there's something terrible that's happening in town, they need you to keep them safe and informed. So if you will begin making some of your posts very much about news, what is relevant to the community, the fun will come and people will follow that, but they need to know that you are the information source, So a lot of your social media and Facebook posts and tweets need to be about hardcore information, what's happening in your town. How can you be safe and informed?
So my last question, and then we're going to actually have a little QA. So you'll get to ask these people some questions, and anything really goes, if you're looking for some practical guidance on any issue. What's the biggest challenge you think that radio is being faced with today, Vince, and how are you preparing to combat it?
I think, the big challenge is perception. I always marvel at the fact that, 90% of the American people listen to local radio, but it seems like 100% of them don't think anybody does. And that fascinates me because, everybody, I know everybody in this room hears, doesn't everybody listen to satellite radio now? And it's still, they had a massive success of announcing that they recently passed 30 million subscribers. That's less than 10% of the U.S. population. And so, it's important to know that there are more people listening to over-air radio now than at any point in history. It's 320 million people in America. 90+% of them listen to a local radio station every week. If you went back, 30 years, when there was 210 million people in America, it was still over 90% of a smaller number. And so, if radio lost half its listeners, it'd still be bigger by a heck of a lot than satellite radio. But the narrative is when you're so big, right, and you have a little erosion somewhere, which, in a world that's got so much choice, how can you not, when you effectively have 100% reach, you're going to have certain amount of erosion. The problem is, telling that story. So the perception's a tough one, but this is why social media and digital is so important to you is, when you've got the most followers of any business in your market, whether it's a little market or a big market, if you really work on growing that, that's your answer when somebody says, does anybody care about your station? You say, yeah, we got more people following us than anybody else in the market. That pretty much puts that to bed because, the neat thing about social media, I would say, is that because everybody uses it, it's kind of accepted currency of influence and relevance. It really is. Whether we like that or not, it's just a fact. I mean, so Nielsen data is really good to have if you've got it in your market, but at the end of the day, you're showing people numbers, and they're seeing a lot of numbers, and it's in, kind of media jargon. And, that's, but people, I guarantee you a 24-year-old who's working at making the digital decisions for mom and dad's local business on Main Street, which has maybe been delegated to them. Look, you help us with this digital stuff. They're going to be a lot more impressed if you've got, in a small community of 6,000 people, half the community's following that Facebook page than they are about what some ranker shows. They just are. It's a different world. And so you can make the argument, ironically, about the relevance of radio and the perception of radio by using the very platforms that are challenging us and not using them against us, but using them for us. And it's the other thing that I think is important is the message that broadcast radio is exactly that. It's this wide reach emotional medium. I try to get all of my team very good at communicating, and this is one of the big challenges, communicating in ordinary language why digital goes so well with radio. You have this emotional medium, this persuasive medium, that you have an immense opportunity to be creative, right? And it's a broadcast medium. It reaches everybody. It's perfect for getting people that didn't want something to want it, right? Digital is really good, better than radio, at connecting a motivated buyer with a motivated seller. If you want something right now, you punch it into your phone, or you go to a website and you can order it. It's good at connecting people that have already made the buying decision or are interested in the product. But as you know, any business that's going to grow needs to be constantly filling that funnel of new prospects and new potential clients. And so, I'm getting my folks to speak in broadcast and narrowcast. You have to broadcast to the masses, make your case, be persuasive, be emotive, but you have to be narrow. Now we can offer narrowcasting capability. While people are making the big case, the emotional case, we can now start to connect through other offerings we have, people that are ready to buy now to the sellers. And so now we can play on both sides of that fence. We never could before. And so that's when I say think entrepreneurially, what I would tell people in the radio industry to think like. really we're armed up more than we ever were. We're not getting, people keep thinking that we're getting all these holes in our armor, but I refute that and say it's the other way around. We're actually getting more tools, more weapons to fight with. And we can actually really, at the end of the day, clients just want to solve their problem. They want more business to come in. They're less concerned about all this stuff. They just want to know you can fix it. And frankly, digital is very confusing. If you ask 100 people what is digital to them, 100 business owners or 100 managers of businesses, you're going to get 100 different answers. To some people, it's, when they say we already do digital, they mean they're doing email blasts. To some people, it means they're posting on social media. To some people, it means they're doing, geo-targeting. To some people, it's because they're advertising on Pandora. To some people, it's a digital billboard. That's their digital marketing. We have a billboard that's digital. So it's confusing, and so really, we just need to be problem solvers. And so we're very good at communicating what radio can and can't do, but really what we have to get good at is just cutting through the clutter for our clients and coming to them with solutions. The other thing is, you should come to them with ideas. We're customizing so many things anymore for our clients. We go to them with a good idea. So we're not going in trying to convince them to do digital. We're going in saying, look, our radio stations and our products influence more people than ever. We reach people on air, online, mobile, social, live, and local. And we're going to customize something across this mosaic of ways we reach people that's unique for you, that hits all the touch points. Who do you want to reach? When do you want to reach them? And we've got all these tools to help you do it more cost effectively and easier than anybody else in the market. And just making that case over and over again to your staff internally and then also on the street to your clients, will go a long way.
Yeah, I agree with one of the biggest things I think we don't do a good job of is expressing everything that we do have available. And for any of you that were in the Pillsbury program this morning, looking at the numbers, I mean, we're in all those spots, but I don't know that we're getting the word out to our listeners and our fans that much that we're there wherever they want to be, whether it's mobile, whether it's streaming, whether it's podcasts, or whatever it is. And I think that's one of the things we don't always do a great job of is promoting ourselves and making sure that our listeners know and our fans know that we're in all these places wherever they're at. And that's the number one thing of the traditional media. I think radio's done the best job of tapping into everything else. And I think we've gotten on board way better than the others have. So I think but I think we have to do a better job of promoting ourselves or making sure that our listeners and our fans know that we're everywhere they're going to be.
All right, I want to give a time for some Q&A for these guys because it's a great time to do that. I wanted to, just before we go, go over some key low-hanging fruit for you to get started with accelerating your digital growth. Some ideas we've had our partners share with us that they felt were really effective. We're number one, forming a digital steering committee, making sure that you have time allocated to talk within your organization specifically about digital, whether it's weekly, whether it's monthly, but making sure that you are getting buy-in and that is actually part of your daily routine. Using the 4P framework, making sure you're framing it around that, the people, platform, policy, and process, making sure that is sort of the 4 check boxes you do cover. Creating great, unique online digital content. You've got a great wealth of ideas from up here on how to do that, how to benefit from Facebook, Twitter, know your market. Make sure that you have ad packages and know what your value is for your advertisers. Be able to explain that and have your sales team be able to convey that effectively. You want to make sure you have a platform that makes it easy to do all of this. And lastly, you want to make sure you have key performance indicators to hold people accountable to this so that they can be measured and their efficacy could be measured. Before we get into the Q&A, I did just want to stress that SoCast is located in booth 314 in the marketplace. And don't forget to take your free digital checklist. And we are doing free consultations if you're interested. Lastly, if you see the gentleman, Sandy, put your hand up at the back door. We are giving away $3,000 in services. That can be either put towards, if you do sign on with SoCast as a partner, towards any setup fees. It can also be used towards one of our training packages that is just a standalone training packages, and we'll be giving away 3 of those. So please see Sandy, give him your business card, and we'll be picking somebody when we get back to Toronto, Canada on Monday and giving you a call with the good news. But please take advantage of that. You can go see Sandy for that. I'm going to grab one of the mics now and come around. If anybody has any questions for Vince, Amy, or Todd, and please just give them a round of applause for helping us out today. I think they were awesome. Does anybody have any questions?
My question is, how did the transition of your regular sales team and how did the transition of your teams look from non-digital to getting them to be digital experts, digital salespeople, digital programmers?
Well, for us, it was, first of all, when I started working with our team on digital, we hadn't really sold it before. We hadn't sold online inventory or digital before. So it was really getting them to understand. They have to buy in. It's hard to sell something you don't believe in and that you're not passionate about. So if you can convince them, this is why it's important that we bring our clients and our partners online with us, or why we develop these digital resources, and this is why it's important to use social media that way, then they can believe it, they can see it, and it makes it easier for them to sell. And then for some of them who have been in the business a very long time, it was hard for them to grasp the concept of not that they didn't understand that it was important, it was just hard for them to sell. So that's where you have your staff as a digital media director, or your staff that is comfortable with it. Go out with these veterans who have the connections and relationships with your client. Let them tell you who to go see. Bring them with you, so that they can make that connection that they've had for years with your client. And then you sit down with their client and talk to them about your online presence and your digital and your social and how that can benefit them. So you can't always make everybody comfortable with it, but what you can do, identify those people and say, you help me. Take me to your clients, let's go out together and let's talk about what we can do.
This may not be popular, but I had a couple of veteran salespeople when we first got started with this that just were not getting it, and I did not push them. I had a couple others that were pretty good with it, but I didn't force the issue with my veteran sellers that were doing fine. They had the information, but I was not going to turn them into digital salespeople. It just was not going to happen. It wasn't easy at first, but I think the biggest thing for us is we're not a rated market, so we're not able to take numbers out. But when it comes to your website, when it comes to social media numbers, you are. So that was something new that we're able to do that we hadn't been able to do in the past. My personal opinion, if a salesperson just was not getting it and they're a good salesperson, I wasn't going to force the issue with them and force it down their throat, because I was afraid that was just going to, turn them off. But, I think the biggest thing we were able to do was to get more information to them, and that was something they were able, really for the first time for a market our size, we were able to take numbers out to them.
That's I think exactly right. I mean, understanding the capabilities of your folks. Some folks are really good at it, and you can work with them to open those doors. The ones that aren't, sometimes it's best to have somebody that complements their skill sets. Identify the clients that are appropriate to pitch something digital to. I mean, obviously if they have an account list and there's people that as the manager you think need to be discussed, you send somebody out, or the manager goes with that person and helps facilitate that. Some just take a long time to get it, some may not get it, and it's just putting them in a place within the company that's best suited to their skill sets. I mean, if it's you're just trying to push something up a hill that's just not going to happen, it may not be in anybody's best interest, and that's okay. I mean, it's one of the things is it's complicated now. We've got lots of stuff we're selling, and some people are one-dimensional in their sales. Some people can sell anything to anybody, and we all know who those people are too. And so it's okay. Like, part of that's just the way the management has to adapt to it, since we're not a single-dimension product selling company anymore. So,
And something that we have done when it comes to digital and online sales, we've increased our commission a little bit for our salespeople. If they can sell to appropriate clients online and digital, we've increased the commission a little bit. And then also for me, as someone who goes out with them and help them sell, if we make that sale, that's their commission, because you don't want to de-incentivize your salespeople to sell online and digital.
First of all, I want to thank all three of you because it's really excellent information from you all. But in particular, Vince, heard you yesterday at Rain, heard you last year at one of the talks, really fascinating, and thank you for your service, too, to our country.
Thank you.
Two questions particularly for you. You said you're at the point where you are now selling services. Are you doing that through the radio station company, or did you set up a different digital company for that? And secondly, are you doing the fulfillment yourself, or are you having a third party do that?
Great question. Through the radio company. And the answer is for the geo-targeting, geofencing stuff, we do have a third party that actually executes the campaign. So our job is to make sure we sell it, communicate it, manage the account. But the actual fulfillment is done back of house, which is, I think, you made the point earlier. If you get a good vendor, they will actually come into market and help do presentations and seminars. We've actually had on more than one occasion, my sales managers have gotten a group of clients together and brought in the company really under us. They came as part of Bold Gold. My team integrated with them, made a presentation, and closed a bunch of business that day. And it was very good, both for our folks to be working hand in glove with them like that, and they appreciated us doing it actually because it closed a lot of business for them. So
We'll have one more question just over here.
Hi, guys. I got a question for all three of you, actually. So when you guys first implemented digital on your stations, how long did it truly take to start generating cash flow, and if so, significant cash flow?
So, we've been working at it in one form or another for, I think, near a decade now. I would say the real significant growth revenue-wise has been in the last couple of years. Particularly on the social side, we spent a lot of time just growing the platform itself, to a point where we thought it was sufficient to even start to talk about ways to leverage it. So it was just a matter of getting good at it. And so, for thinking of the various things we do, I would say probably the last couple of years is when we started to really focus on monetization. I think the big mistake everybody makes is thinking that you can launch something or do something and immediately monetize it. And I think that's the expectation, unfortunately, too many business owners, too many sales managers, and it's fundamentally just a misunderstanding of the platform or the technology. You have to grow the following. Just in a way, it's just like a radio station. If you're going to put a new station on or a new format, you've got to grow the listenership, make people aware of it, and then you can sell it better. It's the same thing with these things, except these things are a little harder for sometimes even the clients to understand what they are. You have to, the education curve for the clients is really big with some of these things. And the other thing to keep in mind when you're selling digital, you'll hear this a lot from your sales folks. They'll say, that client, we talked to them 3 months ago, they said they don't want to do anything, or 6 months ago. The world is changing very quickly, and your client's mindset on what they need to be doing changes, believe it or not, quicker than you think. So 3 months ago, they may have said, I don't need to do this geo-targeting thing, or I don't need to be doing social media. But guess what? They may have been at a conference, much like we're at one, where in their industry said, you got to be doing this. And so you have to keep going back and explaining these things and offering them, because they're eventually going to want these things if they don't now. And you want to be the first person to offer it to them when they do want it.
And you also want to make sure that just like when you're talking to clients about being on the air with you, they can't be on the air. They can't want long-term in great results and spend 2 weeks on the radio with you. They have to stay with you for some time for them to see the end result of what being on the radio actually does for them. It's the same thing with your online and digital. They have to make a commitment with you. Usually an annual has worked best for us. And then by the end of the year, they can see the engagement online and digitally that they have gotten because of you. And then if it's positive, and if you use your on-air to promote what you're doing online and digitally, to tell people they can go and hear all about your client on these avenues, then they're apt to stick with you. And we've seen success with that. But we've been doing digitally fairly heavy for about 4 years. And I know our best days are still ahead. I would like to think we certainly haven't seen the peak of where we want to be and go, but it takes some time. And once you start doing it, give yourself at least 2 years to gauge where you are before you say we're successful or we're not. So it does take some time.
Yeah, I would agree. It does. And I think the first thing you have to do, if you're going to do news and information, you have to show people you're going to do it every day, and you have to commit to it. And until you do that, you're probably not going to sell it very well, because you're going out there and you're really selling a wish and a prayer. And it made me think about when you mentioned going to clients and they don't want to do it. You remember 15 years ago, it seemed like every business got a website. They bought a website for $1.98 from somebody, and they designed it, and it looked really nice, and then they never updated it again. And that same business went, that didn't work for us at all, and totally went away from it. It's probably still out there somewhere, that's still out there and active, but I remember a lot of businesses were that way. So, yeah, you're exactly right. Keep taking it back to them, because things are changing. They're going to conferences, too, and they get away from building their own website. They know they can do it through social media. They know they can do it through the help you give them on your website. And that's the one thing that I tell clients is, when you're with us and you're part of that, the people that are coming back to our website every day, you're getting that engagement from them, plus whatever you've got on top of it. So it does take a while. And I think the biggest thing you have to do is prove to them that you're going to do it consistently every day. The information's going to be there, and then you're able to sell it once you prove it. It does take a few years, no question.
I have one thing before you have one thing. Don't sell widgets and gadgets. Your clients and partners don't really care what things are called. If you've got a texting service or if you've got a streaming player, you sell experiences. You are selling, when you sell the on-air, it's an on-air listing experience. If you're selling a streaming experience, you don't sell a player. You sell an experience. So you want your clients to know that you're selling them an experience. They're not so concerned with what you call it. Just tell them how it can help them.
Also, time spent focusing on it is an issue. I think what happens is a lot of companies, you might hear this within your own organization. They say, we just can't sell this thing. But the reality is there probably isn't a lot of time being put into it. I tell my folks, look, I don't expect you to spend 90% of your time on 10% of our revenue, but I expect you to spend at least 10% of your time on 10% of our revenue. And so what you'll find out is, if it's not working, they're probably spending no time or 1% of their time on it or 2% of their time on it. If you can get them to put in an 8-hour day, a good half hour or 45 minutes into focusing on that, it will work if the product's good and the engagement's there. So.
Well, I want to thank everybody very much. I lastly want to again thank our panelists. They're amazing. And thank you, everybody, for sticking around. We'll look forward to maybe seeing you at booth 314. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the radio show.